And what do you make of your president? He trusts the people in that room. He'll sign whatever they come up with.
I think it was the worst day in his presidency so far, and particularly with this Michael Wolff book out. I mean, it confirms all of the worst things White House staff told Michael Wolff about Trump, that it's all about him. He cares about his press. He's trying to distract from the book, and weirdly ends up confirming it. He seems to have no grasp of the details. He agrees with whatever the last person who speaks has said. I mean, when he agreed with Di-Fi on a standalone Dreamer bill, and the hardcore tough on immigration guy in the room has to be Kevin McCarthy, who used to be Open Borders Kevin McCarthy, to point out to the president that what Di-Fi just said was that she wants just the Dreamer bill and nothing else, and no border security. He shouldn't talk about immigration unless Stephen Miller is there to follow up on everything he says. But I mean, if this goes through, sorry for you and your kids. You have a job talking about politics. It will be irrelevant, and the nation your children will live in is one I am glad I will not be around to see.
It's funny you mentioned the Michael Wolff book, because listen, there were two obvious narratives that the White House was trying to accomplish today. The first was, look at me, I can work with everybody, and we're going to come up with something on immigration. The second was, I'm not mentally unstable. I'm in command of issues. I'm in command, and you mentioned that in a way that suggests that that latter was the more overriding. It's more important to this president right now to send that message than it is to actually stand by what he ran on.
Yes, but it accomplished exactly the opposite. He not only was not in grasp of the most basic immigration details, but he agreed with whatever anyone said. I mean, literally second to second. You have completely different proposals being thrown out there. You have Tom Cotton on one side and Durbin and Di-Fi on the other, and he says yes to all of them.
Yeah. Now, here's the statement the White House put out after the closed-door meeting that we didn't get to see. He said, I quote part of it, they've reached an agreement to negotiate legislation that accomplishes critically needed reforms in four high-priority areas: border security, chain migration, visa lottery, and DACA. Does that say to you that there won't be a standalone DACA, but those four things will all be integrated in some kind of deal?
Well, it's always worth pointing out when DACA comes up that the media has been very effective in lying about this, which is one of the reasons why all of these polls are nonsense. The other reason is the poll questions are nonsense. But do not imagine that this is going to be for, hardworking or not, 700,000 illegal immigrants brought here as children through no fault of their own, Larry. Any amnesty will be interpreted by immigration bureaucrats. It will end up before the courts, and we've been through this before. No one in America knows about it because the media don't want you to know about it. No immigration can be limited. They could write into the bill and keep writing, once a month. And by the way, this applies only to red-headed nuclear scientists, and it will get before the D.C. Circuit. Oh, and by the way, the INS will instantly waive that requirement, or whatever, they call the new INS. Everybody knows what the INS is. And even if the immigration bureaucrats don't say, no, that's too hard to enforce, it will go before the courts, and they will say, no, you don't need to meet any requirements. People who are not even in this country, have never set foot in this country, will be coming in and getting full citizenship under any amnesty. So stop listening to the nonsense about, the hardworking children. And moreover, this is an all-new principle in law. I have never heard that we can't enforce the laws because of the effect on the criminal's children.
Oh, I know. I can't. My favorite debating tactic on this is, you don't let the kids of a bank robber keep the money that he robbed.
Right.
And citizenship and the ability to work and live in this country versus El Salvador is akin to winnings from a bank robbery. And you were the earliest, most passionate, and frankly, most effective advocate for then candidate Trump. Do you feel betrayed by this today? Do you think that the president has betrayed the people who supported him, and has he betrayed his own promises?
Yeah, I mean, it's a slow train coming. I've been warning about this since he was first putting together his transition team, which consisted of his son-in-law, his daughter, half of Goldman Sachs. Do you know Donald Trump has more employees from Goldman Sachs than any other president?
I had not heard that.
Unbelievable. Nobody voted for this. I mean, the big response to Steve Bannon this week has been, nobody voted for Steve Bannon. Nobody voted for Steve. I agree with that. I completely agree with that. They voted for Donald Trump. But I'm pretty sure they didn't vote for Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump either. And as Michael Wolff describes in his book, I mean, Bannon wasn't one with me on a lot of things. I didn't like his Tea Party stuff. But as Michael Wolff describes in the book, the end of Bannon meant this was a family affair. That was not what anybody was voting for. Incidentally, this poll that you will hear 100 times a day on television, because whenever anyone points out the simple facts of we have to we have to end chain migration before granting anybody amnesty, because then you have lawbreakers immediately allowed to bring in their entire extended family. Present
right.
the actual facts to the poll respondents and let's see what they say. But, the left and, half the Republican Party knows that the truth is not popular here. So their answer on DACA is always, well, the polls show. This is specifically designed to make normal people feel like they're crazy. Gosh, there must be something the matter with me, because I don't want to give amnesty these dreamers. But if 83% agree with that, that is not how the poll question was asked.
Right.
I was just looking at some of them online, in fact.
Well,
and B, the people who said, one of the questions was in this, but the one that they cite the most, of course, is Fox News, because it seems to be a statement against interest. 83% support amnesty for dreamers. That wasn't the question.
Right.
But in that exact same poll, Trump supporters were asked, could he say or do anything that would make you change your mind? Guess what the number one answer to that was?
Right.
Not build the wall, not keep his promises.
Yeah. There you go. And now you're afraid that's where we are.
Well,
Ann, can you stay with us? We gotta go check on traffic. All right, Ann Coulter stays with us. We got to talk through this, man. This is an issue.
This is the Larry O'Connor Show.
We continue with Ann Coulter, and coming up we'll have Mercedes Schlupp joining us. And a lot of us were concerned after the so-called deal on DACA that Trump made with Chuck and Nancy. Remember that? And it turns out either that was misinterpreted or it was a head fake. We don't know what it was. Could it be that that's what's happening here? Could Trump sort of be, playing both sides against the middle, and ultimately he's going to stick to his guns, and we're going to get legislation that actually accommodates the promises he made in the campaign?
It's possible we get the promises, but it's not because this is an intentional head fake. The Congress has tried to, both Republicans and Democrats, that was incorrect what I said in the previous segment about all Democrats and 50% of Republicans wanting to amnesty the entire world. It's actually 100% of Democrats and 99% of Republicans.
So Steve King stands alone is what you're saying, basically.
Yeah, pretty much. And it's been shut down 3 times before, not because a major network or politicians stood up and said and opposed amnesty. It's because the American people got wind of what was happening and shut down the congressional switchboards. So it's up to you, America, if you want to save your country. But it is disturbing and alarming that the most pro-American immigration sort in that meeting was Kevin McCarthy. I'm glad we brought him along, but think of how these Republicans feel who have been open borders their whole lives. We beat them about the head. They finally, reluctantly come aboard, and then, Mr. I'll build a wall, is announcing he'll sign whatever you send, and oh yeah, number one, we gotta pass DACA. I mean, the Democrats are the ones who are negotiating quite well here. They're crossing their arms and saying, we don't even have the House, the Senate, or the presidency, but we insist Dreamers, amnesty, that's it, standalone bill, and in exchange we will give you nothing. Whereas Trump shows up at the meeting, the great negotiator, and gives them he'll sign anything they send. He'll sign DACA. He's already backing down on the wall. We've moved from the wall to border security. And whenever any politician starts telling us about the natural barriers and we don't actually need a wall, can we leave that up to the Corps of Engineers? Plus, which is kind of an obvious point. Why are you wasting time with this word salad? The point they are trying to make is, well, it won't actually be a wall all the way across the border. You know, that thing Trump promised you during the campaign.
Right.
No, he's just giving up point after point after point. And that's where we start the negotiation. The hardcore, I'll build a wall, deport illegals, have a moratorium on immigration. The guy who won the presidency for pretty much no other reason than making those promises, he's already given it all up, and the Democrats are saying, nope, you're getting nothing, and we want Dreamers. That's where the negotiation starts.
You mentioned Stephen Miller and Coulter. He wasn't there at the meeting today, but he was in the media on Sunday with Jake Tapper. He was on with Tucker Carlson last night. He appears to be sticking to his guns. He's still there. He's part of a meeting right now, probably at the White House, sort of sorting it all out.
Probably committing harikari.
Is he alone? Is he the last man standing, in your opinion?
Poor Stephen Miller.
Well,
it would be helpful. And, one other thing I'll say about this Wolf book is, these are things people in the White House told Michael Wolff. Some of them are untrue. Some of them are obviously untrue. But these are things that people around Trump are telling a reporter. Now, how did those people end up in the Trump White House? Oh, that's right. He hired them. The idea stated, I think, by Bannon in the book that, well, if, this guy had won, we have all of AEI, and if this guy had won, we would have had the Heritage Foundation, and if this guy, we'd have the whole, but a populist agenda, there's nobody who can do that. No, actually, there are plenty of people who can do that and who went to better schools than the people he's actually hired, I might add. He might want to think about hiring the people who supported him for the first year he was running and not the people who opposed him. But
they should put you in the room negotiating with Steny Hoyer and Coulter. Would you
again,
you do it, right?
A job person here. No. Of all the people I'm discussing, do not happen to be among them. Mickey Kaus, Pat Caddell. I could name dozens of them. Another interesting point Michael Wolff makes in his book, I think a very good point, and something I've noticed about some of these lawyers and the people in the White House, the ones brought in by Priebus. The problem with the swamp is they have to deal with the swamp long after Trump is gone. Their interest is not in making Trump happy. It is making the swamp happy. And as Wolff points out, the same thing is true with the Goldman Sachs people, the Dina Powell, Gary Cohn, Ivanka Trump, Jared Kushner. They're looking at life after the presidency. They need to make the leap off. It is not to make Trump look good. It is to make themselves look good for the next step.
And thanks for joining us. I know how fired you up you were about this, and we were really lucky to be able to harness it so that we can continue the conversation here. Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Goodbye.
With immigration conservatives and Coulter just tweeting out, nothing Michael Wolff could say about @Real Donald Trump has hurt him as much as the DACA love fest right now. So you are going to hear and see that, I think, Dana, over the next few hours.
And yet, Brett, I wanted to talk about this. Look at these quotes today from the USA Today front page above the fold story from Republican, sort of right-wing conservative group members saying that, for example, the Center for Immigration Studies saying rip off the Band-Aid and give them a green card in regards to the Dreamers. A leader of Numbers USA, known as the Great Anti-Amnesty Organization, that we're open to it. And the Federation for American Immigration Reform says members of Congress would not face major backlash from the group's supporters. And I think that's why Lindsey Graham said this. Take a listen.
I think what we can do is do what the American people want us to do. 62% of the Trump voters support a pathway to citizenship for the DACA kids if you have strong borders. You have created an opportunity here, Mr. President, and you need to close the deal.
So I think that's what the president was saying when he says, I'll take the heat for it. He's trying to tell those members, just go ahead and let's try to get this done. And he thinks that the conservatives or his base are going to stick with him.
Right. And I think that's going to be a fascinating part of this story, really the part of the story, if the president can do that. He's saying he can take the heat, and more importantly, he will sign what Congress puts on his desk. In other words, even if he doesn't like it or doesn't agree with all of it, he will sign it because he said in that room, I trust the leaders on both sides of the aisle to move forward with something comprehensive. After that, Dana, I think it's going to be tough for some Democrats to make the 25th Amendment pitch. The fact that he's mentally deficient or incapacitated. We haven't seen that from the past 3 presidents in an open forum with congressional bipartisan leaders, let alone this one.
Well, here's the other thing that I think that happens politically. So you have Bannon now basically severed from President Trump. He had said he was going to try to primary all these Senate Republican incumbents. But you had President Trump at Camp David saying, I plan to support the incumbents who are running. And if the immigration deal is what President Trump says it is now, which is basically one of love, as he says, hearkening back to something from the campaign that we don't have to get into. But basically, I think that makes the politics for Republicans, and if you're Mitch McConnell, much easier than trying to fight lots of different battles, because a lot of that was going to be based on immigration.
If you are in the so-called establishment Republican Party up on Capitol Hill, this has been a great stretch for you. Steve Bannon has lost all power. He is, in the eyes of the president and the administration, persona non grata. He is not the primary challenge around the country that Mitch McConnell once feared, perhaps. And the president is negotiating on things that you think you can negotiate on. Big things. And that potentially is a big deal for the GOP. In the past 30 minutes, with this talk about an immigration deal, also it was announced that the president's going to Davos. Do you think Steve Bannon has any influence inside the White House now?
Also, can you imagine the Davos crowd right now, like whispering and texting each other? Like, what is this going to be like? I would love to be a fly on the wall for that meeting. That would definitely be interesting.
Oh, and he mentioned earmarks.
Oh, right.
The swamp is alive and well, I guess, or something.
Nothing says drain the swamp like bringing back earmarks, but I do think he has a very good point. And later on in the program, we have Matt Schlapp and Michael Meehan here to talk about that as well. So, Brett Baer, I could not think of a better guest to have on.